5 minutes ago, your line snapped tight beside a grass-covered log. Then it happened again. For a little while, you could almost predict the bite before the lure reached the best part of the cast. Now the same lure crosses the same patch of water and nothing happens. No tap, no follow, no swirl. Not even one of those suspicious little line twitches that makes you question your eyesight. It feels as though someone quietly removed every fish from the lake. Your first instinct is to open the tackle box. Don't, not yet. The last successful cast is still the best clue you have, and changing everything would erase it. Those earlier bites weren't scattered around the area. The first fish struck after the lure had sunk for 3 seconds and reached the darker end of the grass. The second came from nearly the same place on the same retrieve. You had something repeatable, not merely one lucky cast, and that makes the sudden silence worth investigating. Freeze that cast in your mind. It landed beyond the log, sank for roughly 3 seconds, and traveled along the outside grass edge. The bite came when the lure reached the darker water near the end of the cover. Make that cast again at the same angle and pace. It comes back untouched. Watch the next one more carefully. The lure lands in the right place. The line settles normally. The retrieve feels familiar. Nothing obvious changed, but the bite doesn't return. Before blaming the weather, the moon, or the fish's personal attitude, bring the lure close. A strand of grass is folded over the hook point. It's small enough to miss from a distance and large enough to keep the lure from working properly. Peel it away, straighten the soft plastic, and pull the lure beside the bank. The tail kicks normally. The knot and line looks sound. There's the easy answer, or at least it looks like one. The clean lure follows the same path beside the log. You're ready for the rod to load again. It never does. That cast changes the problem. The lure had a fault, but fixing it didn't restore the bite. Something else changed too. Either the fish left that lane, they're still nearby, but no longer responding, or the original bites came from fish you can no longer reach with the same presentation. Look around before casting again. The surface is quiet. No wake slides away from the grass. Nothing flashes behind the lure. No prey scatters at the edge. Staring harder won't tell you where the fish went, because that apparently flat patch of water is actually a stack of different routes. Start high. Make one cast that begins moving almost as soon as it lands. It clears the log and returns without a touch. On the next cast, give the lure 3 seconds before retrieving. Halfway back, the line jumps once. There it is. Or maybe not. The lure could have touched a stem, nicked a rock, or passed a fish that never held on. Repeat the same sink count and angle. This time, nothing happens. A clue that won't repeat is worth noticing, but not building the rest of your afternoon around. Give uncertain signals a limit. Repeat the same presentation once or twice, then continue the search if the signal won't return. Otherwise, every rock tick and blade of grass becomes a theory, and 10 minutes later, you're still trying to recreate something that may never have been a bite. Let the next cast travel slightly deeper. The rod begins ticking as the lure crosses the bottom. Those steady taps feel different from the single jump and arrive later in the lure's path. Now you know where the bottom zone begins. The earlier movement happened before the lure reached it, so the middle route remains the better lead. Keep that depth and change the route. Instead of cutting away from the log, cast from several steps down the bank so the lure travels beside the grass for longer. Near the end of the cover, the rod loads for half a second and goes light. That is the first clue with an address. Make the same cast again. The rod doesn't load, but the line kicks near the same corner. You still don't know whether the original fish moved there or another fish was already waiting. You don't need its travel history. You need the lane that is producing contact now. Send the lure beside the grass at the original speed. As it reaches the corner, a fish appears behind it. The fish follows for several feet, closes slightly, and then fades into the darker water. For the first time since the bite stopped, you can eliminate one possibility. The spot isn't empty. At least one fish can find the lure. Moving away now would abandon the clearest answer the trip has given you. Make the same cast, but slow down as the lure reaches the corner. The fish appears again. Add one short pause without letting the lure collapse into the grass. The fish closes the gap, hangs behind it for a moment, and turns away when the lure starts moving. That looks like progress, but it still isn't a bite. Choose one modest change. Keep the depth, route, and pause, but use a similar lure with slightly less vibration. If the fish follows again, you'll know the quieter presentation didn't make it disappear. If it strikes, you've found something worth repeating. The quieter lure reaches the corner. Nothing follows. Give the quieter lure one comparable repeat. Still, nothing. That is what real fishing usually looks like. A sensible adjustment can fail, and a response can disappear before you understand it. Put the original lure back on, rather than turning one refusal into a tour of the tackle box. Another piece of cover sits 20 yards down the bank. Approach it with the original lure at the productive depth. On the first cast, a dark shape turns behind it and disappears. The second produces nothing. Fresh cover created a response. Another immediate pass erased it. Now the repeated pattern is more revealing than either fish. The first few casts around fresh cover create a response. Repeated casts make that response fade. The lure still works, and you reach the right depth at 2 targets. Your own activity has entered the picture. Look back at the bank. Your feet have been scraping gravel close to the water. Every cast lands with a splash beside the cover. Your line crosses the same lane again and again, and your shadow now reaches farther across the shallows. From a boat, the equivalent might be a dropped hatch, a trolling motor correction, or equipment knocking against the deck. Move several steps away from the edge, stop the unnecessary motion. Cast beyond the next piece of cover instead of landing directly over it, then bring the lure quietly along the outside. The cast looks better. It remains quiet. That doesn't clear disturbance as a possibility. Fish may need more than one polite cast after several loud ones. Rest the original log while you fish nearby water. Don't stand over it making tiny checks to see whether it has rested yet. That is less like patience and more like repeatedly opening the oven door. Several minutes later, return from a different angle. The lure reaches the middle lane, passes the grass, pauses at the corner, and nothing follows. Quiet didn't bring the target back. Your tackle works. You found the productive route, changed the presentation, reduced the disturbance, and gave the area time. Another tiny adjustment to the same cast is unlikely to reveal much. Pull your attention away from the lure and look at the whole bank. Before you cast again, something dimples the surface 30 yards down the shoreline. A second flicker appears nearby. Then the water settles. It could be small prey, a feeding fish, or nothing you can identify from here. Either way, it is the first visible activity that isn't attached to your lure. Instead of firing a desperate cast at the fading rings, ask what makes that section different from the quiet water in front of you. You set the rod down for a drink and finally notice how different the place looks from when the fish were biting. The sun is higher. Your shadow stretches in another direction. A patch of tiny surface dimples that had been beside the log now flickers farther down the shoreline. Nothing dramatic announced the change because it happened a few inches at a time while you watched the lure. The log hasn't moved, but the scene around it has. Earlier, a band of shade covered the grass and reached the deeper corner where the bites happened. While you were concentrating on the lure, the sun moved. The shallow side is brighter now, the darker edge has withdrawn, and the small surface flickers you noticed earlier are gone. The cover still looks perfect in a photograph. At this moment, it no longer offers the same combination of shade, grass, and quick access to deeper water. Follow the new shade down the bank, but don't cast at the first dark patch simply because it is dark. That patch lies over a flat, featureless shelf. One pass crosses it without a touch. Shade alone wasn't the pattern. Farther along, the shade cuts across the end of another grass edge just before the bottom drops away. A few dimples disturb the surface inside it. Now the changed condition overlaps cover, depth, and a small sign of activity. Cast beyond the grass and let the lure sink for the same 3 count that found the earlier contact. Bring it along the edge. Nothing happens near the shallow end. Keep it moving. As the lure crosses the deeper corner, the line pulls steadily sideways. The rod bends, and this time it stays bent. Keep the line tight as the fish turns toward the grass. It surges once, shakes its head, then slides into open water. A few moments later, the fish is close enough to land safely. The bite didn't return because the tackle box finally surrendered a magical lure. You kept the useful depth and presentation, then followed the part of the habitat that had actually changed. The old log remained quiet. The new edge put the same kind of route somewhere reachable again. Make another cast before changing anything. If contact repeats around the same depth and type of edge, keep following that pattern while it lasts. If one catch is followed by silence, test another place where the new condition overlaps cover and deeper water before deciding you solve the entire lake. On a different trip, the moving feature may be wind-gathering insects and debris against reachable cover or current-carrying food beside a slower place where fish can hold. Don't chase words such as shade, wind, or current. Follow what the change physically does to food, protection, depth, and the route you're offering can travel. Eventually, the clues may run out. If the tackle works, multiple depths stay quiet, calmer approaches change nothing, and genuinely different habitat produces no sign of fish. Another lure swap may only restart the guessing. Move to different water when access, safety, and local rules allow, or return at another legal time. Sometimes the fish are simply beyond your reach or unwilling to respond to what you can present. When a bite suddenly dies, don't try to outguess the entire lake in one cast. Recreate what worked, verify the setup, search the route, watch what the fish, or the silence, changes next. The fish didn't vanish by magic. Something changed, and the fastest way back to a bite is to keep narrowing the possibilities until you change the thing that actually changed.